The Queen of England, you know, came over to Jamestown. William redid, they built a new chapel, put a new thatch on it, and that was William's thatch. So the Queen of England was standing under an Irish thatch.
Right.
I don't know that she's any better for it, but it takes a lot of, to improve them, you know. And as Dr. Clifford could tell you, the masterpiece, I think, in animal sciences.
Okay.
Hey.
A ball. Very good.
Is that book on breeding and management? Is that the title of that book there? Yes. Well, you know, they're working on the royal family, and they've got ways to go yet.
How did you ever get into the soybeans?
Oh, well, yeah, well, I'll tell you, when I was back in, when I was growing up in New York, I was always interested in plants. I was always interested in living things. You'd go out, we had open lots.
Well, why soybeans?
Well,
He knows the story.
I'll tell you a little bit before I get to that. How did I get into science and biology and all that? You turn over rocks and you look at bugs crawling around. I thought I wanted to be an entomologist at one time. And then I had these monarch caterpillars that I collected, put in a jar, and they pupated, and I didn't know what was happening. And then they turned into these magnificent butterflies. I thought that was awesome. So I just had this fascination with biology and the wonders that were expressed in nature. And when I went to college, I decided I'd study biology because I was interested in biology. I found out all these other people wanted to be doctors, medical doctors. And you know, there's no way I wanted to do that at all. The people come to you bleeding and with wounds. That wasn't for me. I couldn't cope with that at all.
Right.
So then it came time to graduate from college, and I was, well, what am I going to do with this degree in biology? And then I got this book about Luther Burbank and how he had been breeding plants to make them more useful. And I thought, this is really good, because I had taken courses in genetics. Of course, it was covered in our courses, and I thought it was fascinating. It was logical, it was rational, and it made sense. And then we had an interest in genetics, and we had interest in plants, because you'd plant something, you get these mystery packages of seeds, you'd plant them, and these things would come up, and you never knew what kind of leaf was going to be there, and you watched it, and then suddenly it would transform and produce a flower that looked entirely different from the leaf. And I thought that was marvelous. So I was interested in plants. And then, you know, there was a time after World War II when people were hungry in this world. The starving children of Europe. And we still, even today, now again, have a new consciousness of hunger in the world. It's taken a long time. So you could combine an interest in genetics and an interest in plants, and you could do something as a plant breeder to produce food that would keep people from starving. And we remembered the famine and how much people suffered at that time. And then at that time we saw the hungry people in Europe after the war. So you could fit all that together and do something worthwhile. So I went off to graduate school, got a letter of acceptance from Penn State, and started out on this career. I didn't know you had to have a PhD to do this back then, but after I'd been there for a while, I found that out. I might have been scared off if I knew you had to do that. So you just take one step at a time. And so that's what I did. Then I went to graduate school at Penn State, and then I went to graduate school at Iowa State, and then I got a job with the USDA, which paid better than Cornell, but it was stationed at Cornell, and I was an assistant professor, which was a nice thing to do at Cornell. It was a handy title to have. And then after 2 years, they called me up, almost 2 years, and said, we want you to come down to Beltsville. This is headquarters. And so you had no choice. In the USDA, you don't have a choice. They tell you what to do. You know? It said, come to Beltsville. We're closing your position at Cornell. You don't have any choice. So I came down there. Of course, a month later, they had to reopen it, but that was the maneuver there. And it was the biggest forage breeding program in the country at the time. Alfalfa weevil was wiping out the alfalfa crop. So I came down there, and that's when I started working on alfalfa and worked with Jim and the others that we had there at the time. And we had this supervisor who should have had the exorcism. That poor fellow was terribly befuddled. Eventually it ended up that they put him on the national program staff and put him in charge of the Russian programs. And he flew up from Washington to New York to meet these Russian agriculturalists to talk with up there. And on the way up, he realized that he wasn't supposed to meet them in New York, he was supposed to meet them down here in Washington. So he got on the very next plane, they came back down to Washington. But when he was on the plane coming back down to Washington, he realized he was right the first time, he should have met them in New York. So he got right back on the next plane, the whole day going back and forth between the two places. And Jim could tell you about this guy. He was difficult. So anyhow, then I was able to get a friend of mine from graduate school days, Billy Caldwell, to transfer me to soybeans. And they had the great reorganization of '72 at that time, which opened up opportunities to maneuver within the system. And so I took advantage of that. And that's how I got to work on soybeans.
All right.
I don't know whether you all know about Dr. Divine Time's work at USDA, but he's always worked with legumes, and they don't need nitrogen. And so with this oil situation, he's worked with 5 different legumes, and he's had varieties in 3 of those species, which is unusual for somebody to have a variety in one species, go and work in another species, have varieties in that, and go to another species. So he's worked with trefoil, which is a forage, alfalfa, which is a forage for mostly feed for animals, then soybeans, which is both feed and nutrition for people, and now he's working with cover crops, which are hairy vetch, and I think he's going into clover now. So at his non-retirement party, I thought you should know all his achievements. Yeah. So he's had a lot of things in agriculture, and he's a very productive scientist. Really appreciated working with him. I started out as a kid, just like Billy, back from the Marine Corps. I think I came in my uniform, and he said, "What the heck is this?" It's fresh from Vietnam, and he wasn't really, I don't think, I was sort of military oriented, and he was like, "I don't know what this guy's going to be like." But we did very well for about 5 years, I think, and then he moved to soybeans. And then later in my career, we got back together, and with those giant soybeans, we did some work on, it's also good for soil erosion and creates a lot of biomass and may be able to be used for biofuels, the biomass part of it. And there's all kinds of possibilities that he has come up with those soybeans. But there's other crops also. I just want to let you know that there's quite a few.
Since Dr. Divine did a good job of introducing me as so brilliant and everything, it reminds me of the time we were having a lab review. And Tom says, I'd like to introduce the brilliant and energetic Dr. Kuykendall. I think that was the same lab review that, well, I was a young man then. And it was the same, I've known Dr. Divine like Father Lilly since 1975. Whoa! And at that particular lab review where he introduced me as the young and brilliant, energetic Dr. Kuykendall, I was 24, 25, something like that. The same thing, a professor from NC State declared me to be Mr. Rhizobium japonicum for the world, And I remember how thrilled Dr. Divine was for me at that time, and we've been friends ever since. And Jim talked about what a great scientist he is, and I've been privileged enough to know him for a friend for all these years, and I'd like to say what a great human being Tom Divine is.
All right.